Welcome to the Abundant Soul podcast. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Darius Long, a creative visionary whose journey will truly inspire you. Darius is a graphic designer, video editor, and a storyteller who channels his talent into uplifting others. His path has been one of profound transformation, from navigating fundamentalism to embracing new thought and service as a prayer chaplain. What makes Darius' story particularly compelling is how he transforms his personal experiences with anxiety and self-discovery into powerful content that resonates with others seeking their own path to abundance. Through his work, he demonstrates how creativity and spirituality can intertwine to create meaningful changes. Join us as we explore Darius' journey on finding abundance in the present moment and learn how his approach to storytelling helps others discover their own light. Hello, how are you, Ashley?
I am doing great this morning. How are you?
Very good, very excited, and I'm even more excited that we have today with us Darius. Hi, Darius.
Hi, how's it going? I'm
Very
glad to be here.
good.
Yes.
So happy. The way I met Darius was through the Inner Child Workshop #1, and we connected afterward. It was a virtual workshop. So I've seen you take the stand while you were sharing a part of your story, and I remember I was admiring you because I did not have the gut at that time to share my story and come on screen and ask to be guided and coached. So that's my first impression of you, was like, oh my God, he has the gut. I'm so impressed. And then we connected via social media. And every time you were posting on social media what you went through and some wisdom, everything that you learned from your experience, and again, admiring you, thinking, I wish I would do the same. And I reached out to you, asking you, how are you doing that? So, sorry, my voice. So based on that, and can you share a little bit why you started to do the inner child work and what was your experience before and after? Because I know you have a lot to say.
Sure, absolutely. It's funny, it was actually my intention back in 2020 to join Christine's workshop, and it didn't work out that year. But in 2021, I was able to join the virtual workshop with Steph and Christine Hessler. And yeah, I met you there. And for me, I was like bound and determined to talk with him. So yeah, I literally set up my ring light like moments before I went on the screen with Steph and Christine. But yeah, for me, it was just like, if I'm gonna do this, I want to like get the most out of it that I can. And for me, it was definitely a moment where I was vulnerable. Like my body was shaking. Steph had me do like, he had me kind of move my body out to kind of get the tension out. But which I greatly appreciated that conversation. But yeah, in terms of sharing, I just felt like it would be important to give a recap of what I was feeling afterwards. And it felt like this weight being lifted off of me, one that I'm not carrying now. Yeah, I haven't carried since. And I talked about my sister in that workshop, and my relationship with my sister is better. And yeah, it was just a really good experience for me, and it was something that I was really appreciative of being able to participate in. And it was something where it was like I didn't know what inner child was per se. I mean, I had heard Christine talk about it, I had heard a little bit here and there, but I didn't know like in depth what it was, and I didn't really think about carrying around these emotions, even though I was probably 38 or 39 at the time, still carrying around these emotions from when I was like in seventh grade. It's the wildest thing. But yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like it really is important to go back and to look and to, I guess, just like reflect on your life and reflect on, oh wow, I'm still holding on to this emotion from when I was a teenager, from when I was a kid, from this thing that happened that I completely forgot about. It's, something that I'm not thinking about every single day, but it's almost like an emotion can, I don't know, it's almost like an emotion can like block you from making progress because I don't know, you have like these emotional flashbacks. Um, and so it's just wild how that plays out
And I have
Uh,
a question on that.
for sure.
When you said that you were having emotions come up from like middle school, were you able to recognize them, or did you later real kind of uncover where they were from? Like, how did it feel when you were feeling it? Did you recognize that it was old emotions?
Oh yeah, I sure did. Right before I had a chance to talk with him, we were doing this chair exercise, and yeah, the chair exercise, and so I can't remember the exact details of the chair exercise. Essentially, I think it was talking to. I don't remember if it was talking to my mom, imagining that my mom was there, or imagining. No, no, I think it was a younger version of myself was there, and then an adult version, something to that effect. But when I was imagining it in this exercise, I was imagining the like 13-year-old version of myself and I guess just how tumultuous things felt for me back then. And this would have been 1996. And yeah, so even before I had a chance to talk with him a little bit deeper about me specifically, it was like, oh, this is the thing that's coming up for me is when I was 13, maybe even 12 years old, and things I was going through then and how I felt that year. And so I was actually really glad that they did it that way. So because it gave me a chance to identify where the feelings were coming from, what time frame the feelings were coming from. And because I was able to identify that, I could even as I was talking to Steph and Christine, the memories that were coming up of the medics, being there, the nurse that I knew at the hospital that we knew personally, and him almost shaming me, and me carrying around that shame for all these years. He was someone that went to church with us that we knew for like forever, and just yeah, just carrying around that shame all these years for accidentally injuring my sister, and oh gosh, I was carrying it around even in my body, afraid to, I guess just afraid to even be physically active in sports. I was so afraid that I would get hurt. And it was just something that was just, it was such a relief to be able to let that go. And such a relief to, even when Steph was saying to me, uh, you're a good brother because if you weren't, you wouldn't have cared, or something to that effect. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. It was just like, it was just such a weight lifted, something that I greatly appreciated. And I don't know, I will say that when you go back and when you process these emotions and when you think of it from an adult point of view, it's for me it's been helpful because it's like we're not all still carrying around this pain from when we were kids essentially. My sister's not carrying around the pain. I'm not carrying it around. My mom just was just like stuff like that happens when you're kids.
Just, sorry to interrupt. Are you
Sure.
willing to share the story so everyone can
Absolutely.
understand, what you went through at the time and the work that you did?
For sure, for sure. So what happened was me and my sister were just kind of playing around, and I grew up watching like pro wrestling. So yeah, pro wrestling and kids doing moves on each other is not the best combination. Don't try this at home. So yeah, I was doing a wrestling move on my sister, and at the time I was 12 or 13, and she was either 10 or 11. Um, and I basically landed on her the wrong way and accidentally broke her wrist. And I remember the sound, and I remember the way that her wrist looked, and it was completely traumatizing to me. Obviously, it was horrifying for my sister. but for me it was the sound and just the way that her wrist looked where it wasn't intact was something that just stood out in my mind for all these years. And of course, my mom called she called 911. They came over, and I was just kind of like sitting in the corner, just hugging my knees to my chest, rocking back and forth, just horrified that I had done this. And I remember going to the hospital, and that was when we saw the nurse that we knew from church. And I don't know if he said you should be ashamed of yourself, but he basically made me feel like you should not have done this. What is wrong with you? Kind of thing. And oh gosh, I felt horrible, and I carried around the shame that I was feeling for all these years, and it even led to me not wanting to participate in any kind of activity that would break a bone. Even though you get older, your bones are way stronger and all that stuff. But yeah, it definitely affected me and my desire to play any kind of sports, to participate in any kind of thing where I could get hurt in any serious way. And to this day, I never really played football. I couldn't tell you the I couldn't tell you the rules outside of maybe in video games. But yeah, it was definitely something where it was traumatic for me, and I never wanted to cause anybody any kind of pain. And but I'm glad that I was able to participate in the workshop, and I'm glad that I was able to talk it out and to basically release this because it was like this burden that I was carrying on my shoulders, and being able to talk with Christine Hassler and Steph and he was having me do like this body movement kind of thing to kind of get it out of my body, and it was very helpful. And yeah, it was just, I don't know, it's like releasing a burden, but one that I'm carrying, you know what I mean, that I don't necessarily need to keep carrying. But nobody tells you that. That's the thing, is that when something happens in childhood and you go on throughout your life, maybe you're 40 years old and you're still carrying around this thing from when you were in middle school, and no one says, "Oh, hey, you can let that go, right?" You know what I mean? So having a chance to be able to let that go and to be able to release what I had stored up in my body and to be able to release these, because there would be times when I was like going to sleep and I was just kind of like maybe resting my hand on my wrist, if you kind of sleep with your head on your hand, and I would be freaked out that I was going to break my wrist from sleeping, which wouldn't happen, of course. But in my mind, it was like that's how it would occur. And yeah, I was just holding on to it, and but being able to let it go just felt, oh my gosh, it was very, very freeing.
Do you still now have this fear about breaking bones, or do you still, are afraid of sleeping on your arm, or is it really released now?
Oh, it's definitely released now, and it's something that I'm very grateful for. It's, uh, I mean, I haven't done like any sports because I'm like 40, so I'm not gonna go out and join the football team or anything like that. But yeah, it's certainly kind of the kind of thing where I'm not terrified of physical activity. Um, I'm just I'm too old to go out there playing football. At this point. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where I'm not afraid of it, and I can sleep normally. I don't have these flashbacks because that's the thing. I was having like flashbacks to it, and I was remembering the sound, and I was remembering how her wrist looked, and how it was just like not. Even talking about it right now is kind of bringing up the visual for me. But I'm not actively remembering it all the time, and I'm not actively worried about breaking something. And that is, oh my gosh, that's such a relief. I'm very, very grateful for that.
I mean, it was PTSD, right? It's
Yeah, that's how I would put it. And if you would have asked me that when I was younger, I would have emphatically said no, because I equated PTSD with being, in the military and experiencing the I guess the horrors that come from what you see as particularly in combat. But so I would have said no, no, of course not. But it was something that I was carrying around from the past, and the sound and the visual of it was would play back in my mind, and it would affect me in present day. So yeah, yeah, that's a good way to label it.
Have you, excuse me, have you shared this experience with your sister and like maybe um, asked her, like, were you open with her about like carrying those feelings and then being able to release it?
You know, I sure was. I think that it was shortly after the workshop that I had a chance to talk to my sister, and I was like, "Hey, this is how I've been feeling. This is what I was experiencing for these years." And she was like, "Oh, I didn't know you were feeling that way, and I didn't know that you were carrying that around." And she was like, "I forgive you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you."
Oh,
Yeah, because she wasn't carrying it around.
right.
She wasn't carrying around, even though it was literally her that was getting hurt, she wasn't carrying around the memory and the pain for all these years. And I even talked with my mom as well. And my mom was, she did, she just thought it was a freak accident, something that we dealt with at the time. Took my sister to the hospital, got her a cast. Sister healed up. Didn't really think of it afterwards. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, thank you for not blaming me and, labeling me as the villain. And also was like, oh, they're neither of them is holding on to this. And it was just me. And so it was like, it was just really, really good to get forgiveness, I guess, maybe that's the right word, but to know that I was forgiven even before I brought it up in conversation. And to know that it was, they both just saw it as just a freak accident. Neither of them thought that I did it on purpose. And it was definitely a weight off my shoulders. And it was something that I was very glad that I had a chance to talk to my family with. Plus, I feel like my relationship with my family is a little bit better after opening up about this. And that's, I mean, I would say that that's always a good thing is when you can get a closer connection with your family, especially if it's something that you're holding on to from the past that just isn't really serving anybody. And so for me, being able to talk about that was definitely alleviating. And I'm glad that I let them know how I was feeling. So yeah,
That's
But
awesome.
yes, and I love what you shared about basically you were your own critic, you were blaming yourself. This was your point of view, and all the stories that you made in your mind about, you, even though you didn't do it on purpose, you still blamed yourself for what happened. But your family had a completely opposite point of view, and they didn't even think of bringing up, you should not be ashamed because it never crossed their minds because they already had forgiven you. It was an accident. So it's we tend to embed things in ourselves that are not the truth, or it's our truth. I should
Yeah.
say it's our own truth.
oh
So
yeah,
being able to heal these parts is an amazing work. And I love that you shared that it brought you closer to your family. That's amazing. So definitely this workshop helps you move forward into your life, made things happier with your relationship.
oh yeah.
So what did you experience after the workshop? Did you continue to do the work, or what happens in your life after?
Oh sure. After, so it's funny. I signed up for part two, like on day three of the workshop. Um, but afterwards, let me think about it. I think afterwards, I wound up doing some coaching, working with a mutual friend of ours, Stephanie, and that was very helpful. It was very cathartic being able to get out some of these emotions from. I mean, some of it was things that I was carrying around from my 20s. Some of it was things from like actual childhood. But actually being able to go through and process these emotions and these things and experiences that I've been having from gosh, just various times and ages in my life, and for different reasons as well. Some of it was religious trauma. Some of it was sexuality, even. Some of it was just family, moving around, just family dynamics. And it was just like I was holding on to a lot of tumultuous things that I had been feeling over the years. And I think the term is shadow, going into your shadow.
Hmm.
And so for me, it was basically shedding a light on things that I had either like forgotten about in my life or things that I just didn't really look at too much from when I was younger, or things that I just wanted to just really not even think about, you know, because I felt like it would have affected my daily life in like a negative way. And yeah, I'll tell you that going in and doing that work, it's like integrating disowned parts of yourself is how I would describe it. It was being in coaching and identifying these parts of myself that I had labeled as shameful, or these parts of myself that I had labeled as something that's not worth sharing with another person, whether it was being in a single parent household and feeling like I was inadequate because I wasn't raised by a father, and feeling like I wasn't man enough because I didn't have a father in my life. That was something that I was carrying around for like forever. And it's when you get to a place where you really do that introspection, and when you get to a place where you can label it. See, that's the thing. It's like emotions and memories don't always necessarily have like a clear label. And so for me, it was almost like this ghost lingering, this ghost just kind of lingering, in the house of my heart, so to speak. And it definitely took coaching, and it definitely took some concerted effort to really go in and to really be able to spot what was going on there. And I'm sure glad that I did. I really, really am glad that I did, because I'm not carrying it around in my everyday life. I'm not carrying around this burden from when I was 12, or really even feeling like I was inadequate from, you know, being in college and, not dating and feeling like, because like one of the things was me feeling inadequate because I didn't have my first girlfriend until I was 22. And so I felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt like I wasn't manly enough. I just felt like there was something about me that wasn't good enough. And I was carrying this around, even though it was like, you know, 39, 40 years old, whatever I was at the time. And I was still carrying around these thoughts from like high school, and from being picked on, and from being teased, by immature people when I was in high school. And it's the wildest thing. It's how you can hold on to people bullying you, and how you can hold on to the things that people say to you and make you feel inadequate, and make you feel like maybe you're not masculine enough when you're young, high school, college, whatever the age is. But carrying that around into adulthood and into midlife, so for me, going back and looking at that and thinking about those experiences and being like, oh, that guy was just immature. That doesn't necessarily mean anything about me per se. It was just an immature 16-year-old saying something to me. Uh, Probably because he wanted to look cool in front of his friends. And so for me, being able to see it in that light and to be able to be like, oh, well, I can let that go, and totally forget about that. That was very, very freeing and liberating. And I'm glad that I was able to go back and do some introspection, and I'm glad that I was able to go back and look at myself and realize, oh, I'm not inadequate in the ways that I always thought that I was. And I'm grateful for this type of work. I'm grateful for that coaching is even a thing, you know, because I didn't really know it was a thing before, let's say, 2018. I think that was when I discovered Christine Hassler, and I think that was when I discovered that coaching was a thing, and that there were people there who were basically dedicating their professional lives to helping people overcome obstacles and helping people overcome these things that they're holding on to. So I'm really appreciative that I had a chance to work through things that were going on with me.
I had a question about doing when you're doing the work and working with a coach. Um, do you feel like when you were talking about kind of like the shadow work stuff, that everything came up at once, or would it be like one thing would come up at a time and then, you would feel like you could kind of release that and then another thing? What was the process like?
Oh, sure. So it was like a popcorn kind of thing.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was like one thing would heat up and then turn into a popcorn, so to speak. And then the next thing would kind of come up, so it'd be like one week I was experiencing this, you know, memory or this trauma from the past. And another one would be it's funny because even right now as I'm talking, I'm thinking of different experiences, and I think one of them was me being in the because I joined the Maryland Army National Guard when I was in high school. And part of the reason why I joined was because I felt inadequate. I didn't feel like I was masculine enough. And I felt like if I join the military, that'll make me more of a man, and then people will respect me. So I joined the guard because I was still in high school. So joining the guard or the reserve was the practical choice, and I was still 17. So that was something that came up. The reason why I basically chose to do these things was feeling inadequate, and I was holding on to this, I guess, this story about myself. And so from there, that just kind of led into, I think it kind of led into sexuality to a degree. And because I didn't date in middle school, high school, or college. And so that made me, I didn't really know what to think of that. Some of it was kind of like, oh, well, maybe it's because I was raised religious and, like saving yourself. But I was like, no, I don't really think that's it. Um, without, um, so, it's funny because it's coming up for me now. It's literally something that I'm thinking about and talking about right now in therapy. Like literally, like 2 days ago, we talked about this in therapy. But I think that I may be a little aromantic and maybe even asexual to an extent. But the story that I was telling about myself for all these years was that I was inadequate, that there was something about me that wasn't I don't know, maybe desirable enough, or my drive to connect with someone in a deeper way just wasn't as strong as other guys. And I don't know, maybe that is true, but it's also okay. And it also doesn't necessarily mean that I'm less of a man, quote unquote, because I didn't, get married when I was 23. I'm just throwing out a random age. But so that yeah, it's wild how something that was brought up in coaching can lead even a few years later, and kind of processing that even more and unpacking that even more, because it was like I felt like something was off. I just didn't know how to label it. And at first I was like, well, maybe I'm bi. And talking about it in therapy was like, I don't think that's it. And but yeah, getting it down to something where I can name, and getting it down to something where it's like, okay, there's because the way that it felt was like it felt like, do you know Harry Potter, like the Harry Potter movies?
Yes.
Okay, so I saw Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets once, right? But the way that I'm remembering it was like there was this Chamber of Secrets that was like in the house of my heart, so to speak. And it was just like one day I realized that there was something there, and I was like, oh, like what? there's a whole chamber here. I was like, what? It just felt like finding this extra room. I guess just in my life, in my mind, in my heart, and it was kind of like, oh, I didn't realize that there were these different things going on. I didn't realize that there was, and I guess to be less mysterious was, so I had always been fascinated by, I guess by the queer community. I'd always been fascinated by queer content, My favorite show when I was a teenager was Dawson's Creek because there was a gay character on it, and I liked Will and Grace. And um, I had basically just been drawn to these I guess these different media, and I was always, Drag Race was another thing that I always thought was such a good show, and it really is. But and so I was like, okay, well maybe because I like this stuff, maybe that means that I'm bi. But I'm realizing that because I don't necessarily have the desires and the drive myself to be in a relationship with a guy, or even to have sex with a guy, that it doesn't mean that I'm bi. I do have an appreciation for that aspect of the queer community, but it's really me just kind of realizing that there's something there and that there's something within me that is maybe one of those labels. And right now, I feel like the aro asexual part is probably where I'm kind of sitting. And I definitely do support. I do support the folks that go through the struggle and they go through just wanting to love the person that they love. Um, so for me, that's something that I personally think is worth doing some work in. But yeah, it definitely took. I mean, it was just like it wasn't even like a flashlight. It was like a it was like a spotlight, the bat signal or something like that. Like oh, like there's something there's something there, and it was just like all these years of me gravitating towards certain I guess certain TV shows or characters or movies or whatever. Like literally, like Jack from Dawson's Creek was one of my favorite characters, and but yeah, it was something that was within me and something that was making me feel like I was different, but I didn't know in what way I was different. And that's something that I'm working through, like literally, like right now, like at the moment. So I feel like this is a continual process of shedding light on who we are, and this continual process of, I guess, just unpacking and unloading. Maybe pulling things out of the suitcase confetti. Here's this, here's that, here's everything that's kind of going on. Just pulling out these different things and these different memories and experiences and maybe preferences is a good way to describe it as well. And so for me, I'm actually very glad that I'm doing it because I feel lighter. I feel more alleviated. I feel freer as a result of going in and looking and as a result of being like, oh, well, here's this thing. You know what I mean? And it's just I'm just really glad for this kind of work, this kind of introspective work that it takes, whether it's inner child method, whether it's chair method, whether it's a breath work or yoga, y'all talk about yoga, or whether it's yeah, yeah, that's something I need to start doing again, honestly. But whether it's really just any of these modalities and these different methods, journaling, of course, writing, basically these different ways of releasing what's in here, and I'm pointing to my heart right now for the audience, but what's in here, and just kind of releasing it if it's not serving us. If it's something that we're just kind of holding on to and something that's causing us emotional pain and causing us turmoil, release it, thank you. And I think that that's another thing that we did in the inner child workshop was, you know, at least how I remember it is letting it go, saying thank you for being with me. The way that I remember it is like holding your inner child's hand and saying, I've got you now,
Yep.
basically integrating that into your heart and letting that experience or that emotion go and leaving it, in the past. It was something that you went through. But now in present day, you're going to love this inner child and this inner part of yourself. And so for me, learning that things like that were possible, oh my gosh, I'll tell you, oh my gosh, it's so liberating. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm really, really glad that I stumbled onto, and that's the thing. It's I totally stumbled onto this world of, I guess, healing and spirituality. And one of the things that kind of started it was I don't know. Do y'all know who Gabby Bernstein is?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So Gabby
Steph does.
Bernstein, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I discovered like her book Super Attractor at the time, and it was like I think it was on sale from Audible, and I was like, okay, let me check this out. And so I listened to the book, and it was just like it just like blew my mind at the time the way that she was describing things because I had never heard anybody describe spirit or higher power in that way, in that I guess in that context, and I had never heard anyone just explain things the way that she did, and it was just like mesmerizing to me. And so from there, it led me to, I guess, just looking at spirituality in a different way because I had just like walked away from it beforehand. I was like, I was just like, I don't even really want to, I was like, thanks, but no thanks beforehand. So for me, it gave me a chance to, and I like to, right now, I like to just call it divine love. That's the phrase that I like to, yeah, that's the phrase that I like
I
to
love
use.
that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Sounds good.
Yes.
yeah. That's how, yeah, so that's how I like to call it. But yeah, Super Attractor was definitely a pivotal book for me, as well as The Universe Has Your Back. And, the other one about, it's killing me that I can't remember the title right now. The
Spirit
Judging.
junkie.
That's a good one too. It's the Judgment Detox. That was like, yeah, I
Ooh.
read that one twice.
I should read this one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Judgment
that sounds
Detox is
intriguing.
really good because yeah, it's looking at your inner critic was a lot of it and how you can. And it's funny because one of the ways that it showed up for me was judging other people and judging. Well, yeah, obviously, but judging people that looked and lived in the ways that I wanted to. So, I had a coworker that had like piercings and tattoos, and I thought that she looked super cool, But in my mind, I was like, oh, I was like, who does she think she is? To have all these tattoos and piercing, and and yeah, I have a nose ring now, and I have an industrial ring as well. So I got a couple of more tattoos since, but what was coming up was that she was free and liberated in the ways that I didn't feel free and liberated. I wanted to feel free to express myself. I wanted to feel free to have artwork on my body or to have, piercings that I thought looked cool. But I was carrying around this judgment from when I was younger and being raised very conservatively and being raised to look modest and being around someone that was just free and liberated was like it was realizing that for me it was realizing like oh I'm judging you you're just being yourself and I'm judging you because I don't feel like I can be myself and so learning I feel like learning these things and learning like that there's a root to it learning that there's a root to whether it's judgment or whether really whether it's just any kind of thing that's pointed towards another person that doesn't really have anything to do with them exactly. I feel like learning, oh, like there's a root and there's an origin of why I'm judging the random guy with, tattoos and maybe he has. I lived in Austin at the time and maybe he has gauges in his ears. And gauges were like really, really popular when I was living in Austin. But basically, someone that just like to me looks super cool. But I had always been told, don't go that, don't go that far. Don't, that's too much, keep it modest. People will not respect you if you have a bunch of tattoo. You know what I mean? That was kind of the things that I had grown up with. And but but being able to label it and being able to be like, oh, that's actually not something that's genuine for me and how I feel. That's just what I was told as a kid, and I
Yeah.
can let that go.
That's incredible. All the
Yeah,
work that you've done is incredible. I mean, the awareness that you have with all the work and what you said is so true. I mean, you spot it, you got it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right? That's
absolutely.
something that you don't realize that you have it within you. So that's why you critique and you judge themselves. But you are jealous, basically. But you are jealous because you don't see your own potential. And maybe it's a potential that you have to develop, right? You have to practice, you have to learn, but you are capable of, like, being free, right? Being able to have all the tattoos and piercings that you want. So that's, I mean, your story and what you're sharing is so amazing and inspiring. And it also shows that, you know, only 3 to 5% of your thoughts and what you do are conscious. All the rest is subconscious. So everything that you ingrained as a child, that's how you project. And that's why you were jealous of that person that was so free. But you had the awareness and the gut. And I want to emphasize the gut of going there, because that's not easy. So can you share a little bit how you felt during this work? Did it bring a lot of anxiety? Because what you're sharing, that you had shuffled your own, I would say, identity to that point, where you mentioned the popcorns, right? Like all these feelings and emotions should have come up. All this shadow would say, "Hi, I'm here." So what kind of feelings did he brought during the work? And you mentioned it's not over, right? It's a journey. So can you share?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I'm actually really glad that you asked. So for me, in doing this work, one of the things that I was really kind of struggling with was my job at the time because I felt like I was working remotely, but I felt like it just wasn't a fit for me anymore because I thrived in being around other people. I thrived in being sociable to an extent. I thrived on that human interaction, and I was working in another state, so my job was in a different state from where I lived, and it was just a combination of different things. It was turning 40. It was even my sister having a baby. It was just like me really just kind of looking at my life at age 40 and being like, this isn't it. This isn't where I want to be. And ultimately, I wound up leaving that job without having a concrete job lined up. And man, it's just like when you have that shakeup in midlife, you could call it a midlife crisis, or you could call it a midlife breakthrough. You could call it pressing the brakes because you feel like you're being steered in the wrong direction. And that was how it felt. It felt like I was just going in the wrong direction, and it felt like I was just, I knew something had to give. I knew something had to change. I knew that I didn't want my life to keep being what it was. And I wound up leaving that job. I wound up, honestly, in the interim, doing a lot of introspection. But before I got to that point, I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of anxiety, and I was just riddled. I was constantly thinking about, like, I'm not going to have a good life if I don't change something now. If I'm not in a relationship, then I'm never going to have a kid. And I'm never, you know what I mean? I'm never going to have this, that, and the third. I have to do it now. I'm 40. You know what I mean? Like I was just placing
Mm.
all these just expectations on myself and all these different weights, these different societal pressures, I guess, on myself, uh, to say that you're, you're 40 years old, so you have to start thinking about kids, and you're 40 years old, so you have to start thinking about getting married, or buying a house. That was another thing, was I was trying to buy a house when I turned 40, and it was like I was trying to live my life according to what I felt like society was expecting of me,
Mm.
and ultimately I wound up pumping the brakes because I was very unhappy. I was very unhappy. I was feeling anxiety every day, but I wouldn't have labeled it as anxiety because I always thought anxiety was like having a panic attack. And I was like, I know I'm not having a panic attack, but I was constantly ruminating on the future, and I was constantly ruminating on this is these are the things that I should do. And and right now I'm 41, getting ready to be 42 at the time of this recording. But it was something that I just knew that something had to give. So a huge chunk of that was leaving my job. And at the time, I was a prayer chaplain at my church, which is someone who like supports the congregants in the church and someone who prays with people. Basically, someone who gives a safe space. But because I was going through so much stuff in my personal life, I had to take a step away from that. And the anxiety that I felt just kind of came to a head, and I I just slid into depression. I just slid into a major depressive episode where I was, oh man, I was just walking around just like a ghost or something. I was walking around very slow, very little energy, very no joie de vivre, so to speak. And that took a few months. So maybe from October to January, roughly something like that. And then slowly it's just been this process of coming back to myself, this process of blooming again. Some of it has been seeing a doctor, some of it has been being in therapy, doing introspective work, taking a break, slowing down. Because when I was working full time, I was working full time, but I also had a side hustle. So I'd be up till midnight, basically every night, just pushing myself hard. And so in this past year, this past however long it's been, I've had a chance to slow down, this chance to I'm trying to think of what the right word is. Convalesce, I guess that might be the right word. This chance to kind of convalesce and this chance to kind of come to myself and to be more balanced, be more centered, and really just kind of alleviate the anxiety because I didn't realize that I was riddled with anxiety. I didn't realize that I was being ruled by anxiety because I always just thought of anxiety as just like you literally have something that just like arrests your body. You can't breathe. You know, what you see on TV
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And I didn't, you know, if you would have asked me, I would have been like, no, I'm cool. Everything's fine. You know, like, no, everything's like,
Your
it's all,
basic
it's all
your
good.
baseline was already like
Yeah,
anxiety. So
absolutely. And it was just like, oh my goodness. But yeah, so I would have told you that everything was totally copacetic. You know, all the while, my heart is like racing 90 miles an hour.
Mm.
So, so, but yeah, I'm definitely glad that I've had this time and this, and not just that, but I also connected more with my family. So my relationship with my family is even better than it was when I was just pushing myself hard all the time and when I was working all the time because I didn't visit them. You know, I didn't really see my mother, didn't really see my sister, but I see them all the time now. Going to be seeing the baby this weekend.
Oh,
Today, actually.
oh,
Now that I'm thinking we're
better.
babysitting, yeah. So I'm gonna be seeing my niece today. Um, so it's in that aspect, it's definitely better. But yeah, and sometimes you do get to a point, and maybe it's a midlife, maybe it's a quarter life crisis kind of thing, you know. But whatever time period it is, if you have a safe place to take a step, to take a breather, take a moment, if that's what you need to do, if that's what your body's calling you to do, your mind, your heart, your soul is calling you to do, and you're safe to be able to do that, then I would say if you're at that point and you can do that, I would say please do it,
Mm,
especially if you feel like you're gonna crash and you're gonna burn, because it's better to have that time to kind of convalesce with yourself, to have that time to kind of go through and look at what's not working in your life and do what you can to adjust it or to let it go. Because for me, that was what I needed. Because the depression just, that wasn't going to lead to anything good. So for me, I needed to pump the brakes. I needed to slow down and I needed to realign. I needed to basically get back to living life without all these expectations weighing down on me. All these expectations of I'm 40, I'm in my 40s, my life has to look a certain way. And getting to a place where I'm 40, I'm glad that I'm 40. I have a lot of experiences from being a teenager, being in my 20s, 30s, really honestly remembering the good stuff from the past, remembering, all the things that I've overcome. And see, that's the thing about depression is you don't necessarily remember all the things that you've gone through in the past and how you're actually like I guess maybe like a champion. That's the word. A champion and overcomer is how I would describe it. And because I feel like depression can kind of fog your brain, and I feel like anxiety can make you like short circuit. And by getting into a place where you slow down, and whether it's being in nature was something that was also very helpful. Just going for a walk in the park and seeing like the birds and the squirrels and like actual nature and being like, oh, like the trees and the leaves and like I was just like, oh, like nature always just continues, even when there's stuff going on, even when there's a squirrel, jetting out in front of you, or birds, or whatever the thing is. It's kind of like, irregardless of what I have going on, what drama I have going on, there's still this beautiful planet that I'm living on. There's still this beautiful nature. I still have the opportunity to go outside, to look up at the stars, to soak in the sun, to really just remember like I'm alive and I get to experience this beauty that's going on, and just taking a moment, taking a breath to just be in the present moment, as they say, was, oh my goodness, that's the kind of thing where it's just like so helpful. But when we're going on 50 miles an hour, well, maybe not 50, but let's say 80 miles an hour, and when we're going on at all cylinders, we might not necessarily take the time to slow down to do that. But for me, in taking the time to slow down, to have a moment, to be in nature for like 2 seconds, maybe even walk outside barefoot, I feel like that's pretty good. Is something that's just like, oh, let me slow down, let me breathe, take a moment. I'm okay. Maybe even touch my heart. I'm okay. Things are fine in this present moment. And just really realize that, it's almost like a character from a TV show that goes through this very tumultuous thing, and then you're just like, what's gonna happen next? But then that character just takes a moment, takes a breath. Like Captain, I'm thinking of Captain America. The character just like takes a breather for like 2 seconds, and then they keep going. But taking that breather for 2 seconds or however long it is, it's so important. And I definitely would recommend that to anybody who just needs to take a moment.
Wow, thank you so much for this conversation. And there were so many, how we call it, gold nuggets?
Yeah, golden nuggets.
Golden nuggets.
Yeah.
Golden. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. I think we learned so much, from slowing down to getting to know your shadows to how to do your inner child, right? Meet you from within, getting to know yourself, and going through anxiety. So many things. I think I have missed. Maybe I have missed things too, while I summarize. But thank you so much for joining,
Of course.
and I wish you the best, and
Thank you.
hope that you will be there again.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. We hope the stories and insights we've shared today have inspired you to embrace your abundant soul and live your life with more presence, purpose, and passion.
Remember, the path to awakening is unique for each of us, but we're all connected by our yearning for deeper meaning and authenticity. So keep an open heart and mind, and trust that the universe will guide you exactly where you need to go.
This has been the Abundant Soul Podcast. See you next Sunday as we continue to explore the depths of spiritual awakening and personal growth.